Okay, that brings us to our next speaker, who's one of the world's most influential commentators on demographic and global trends. Simon Kuestenmacher is the director and co-founder of the demographics group specialising in insights into global population dynamics, migration patterns, social trends, and Australia's economic landscape. He is a columnist for the New Daily, a contributor to The Australian, and a highly sought-after media commentator. Simon has amassed more than 600,000 global followers. It's a couple more than I've got on my Facebook. I think I'm up to 45. Am I on the journey? On the journey? That's good. I do delete them every year because people just annoy me, but that's another story. Who reaches over 35 million people each month. That's impressive. And has visual storytelling and data-driven insights, ranking him, and this is, I think, very, very impressive, ranking him among the top 10 influencers worldwide in data visualisation. With academic foundations in geography from universities in Berlin and Melbourne, Simon brings a rigorous analytical lens to the forces shaping higher education, workforce planning, international student markets, and campus futures. Please welcome Simon to the stage.
Fantastic, thank you. And thank you guys for the warm welcome. Yeah, I'm a demographer. All that means is I do nothing all day, every day, other than to look at those big fat data sets, and then I try to figure out what it all means. What it means for Australia and what it means for the education and research sector in Australia. You would, of course, be excused these days if you open up a newspaper, if you listen to the news, to feel a bit depressed, a bit pessimistic. You hear about wars, trade wars, tariffs, climate change. There's a lot of bad stuff happening. And I'd say, well, let's try to put this into perspective, what this means for the future of Australia. Ta-da, here it is. Australia operates a very, very simplistic business model. We do four things and four things only that matter to anyone on the planet. We are, of course, a mining nation. The vast majority of our exports are mining related, and I would argue they're not at strategic risk. We still see about 50 years worth of human population growth on the planet. These are people that consume steel, for example, that is our iron ore and coal thrown into a blender, and we'll see high demand for this. We also are probably very close to a new super cycle in mining because of the rare earth steels that are being sold. So that means our mining products will actually be rather sought after. And even more importantly, as more and more buyers around the world get concerned about stuff like supply chain sovereignty, turns out we are essentially the only mining superpower on the planet that is also a stable, established democracy. So yes, it is more expensive to get gas out of our grounds because we don't use the, economically very attractive slave labor like in Qatar. So it's more expensive, but we can guarantee you supply chain sovereignty. So I think our mining sector will be just fine. We keep underestimating in Australia. I keep forgetting how important our agricultural sector is. We are one of the few global food superpowers that actually helps to feed the world. Around the planet, we see yields at severe risk from climate change in many regions. That, of course, drives house prices. Very Australian Freudian slip here. That drives food prices up. And we also see as the Strait of Hormuz is, let's call it blocked for a little bit. Lots of fertilizer trade goes through there. That also keeps escalating food prices. That is terrible news if you find yourself in the bottom 2 billion people of this planet. But hey, we look at this from the Australian perspective. Great news for us because we are an exporter. All the stuff that we export, we actually get more money for it. So that is a positive development. Also, our yields in Australia aren't at major risk. We have things like the wheat belt shifting in Western Australia, but that just means different farmers grow the wheat. Of course, we are also entertaining people. That is our tourism sector. We are a convenient direct flight away in the same time zone from the largest emerging middle class in human history to date, and ever into the future, by the way. So what we're seeing in Asia, what we're seeing in India, the emergence of the, it's called the global middle class. So these are people that are rich enough to consume at a global level. So those guys continue to grow massively. They want to enjoy their newfound wealth. We offer an exotic but safe tourism destination, convenient flight away. That's wonderful. We will continue to see these tourists come. We also, and this is where you guys enter the room, we also charge an arm and a leg to sell degrees to this newly established middle class across Asia. And there's no sign that this middle class does not see an English-speaking university degree as an integral part to improve the lot of life that their kids are facing. So I think as a nation, in the foreseeable future, we will continue to be able to decide how many international students we want to have in the system. So in a sense, this presentation up to now was an absolutely unnecessarily long-winded way of saying, she'll be right. This economic model of ours continues to deliver prosperity. That is not at strategic risk. You see so much of the world geopolitics resetting the power balances across the world, trade corridors changing, transport corridors shifting. That is a lot of change. But we are much, much less severely impacted by this than other countries, like my home country of Germany, for example. We need to completely reinvent the economic model. Not here. Yeah, it's not a complex economy. It's actually a hyper uncomplex economy. There's a thing called the Global Economic Complexity Index, measures 130 countries, and it asks the question just how complex is your industry? 130 countries in the mix. We rank 105th between Botswana and the Ivory Coast. Yeah. It is only the reason why we are a richer nation than our neighbors in the ranking is that we have strong institutions and we do actually ultimately redistribute this wealth across the country to a certain degree. We could, of course, really push for the diversification of the economy. We could do this by value adding to manufacturing. Value added manufacturing is the idea that we produce steel here rather than just send out the raw commodities so that someone else makes steel. We could sell juicy steaks to the world instead of live animals. That is what we talk about in value added manufacturing. But of course, there are two problems here. The first one is these are energy intensive things. Our energy is stupendously expensive. Unless we halve energy prices, there is no scenario in which we will actually value add to manufacturing. Also, we of course are a footloose economy very soon, where more and more of the economy shifts towards digital services and so forth. They can be anywhere, literally anywhere in the world. We should grab a pie of that. Well, we could, theoretically, but data centers are very, very energy hungry and water hungry to begin with. So it's like, well, are we the best place in the world to put those? Well, potentially, but we also then, of course, want to attract more and more knowledge workers. And these knowledge workers, they want to live in livable cities. Turns out we have heaps of those. But unfortunately, these people also want to be housed, and we have not very affordable housing. So I am forecasting that the future of Australia in the next 10, 20 years will look much like the present. We're not changing much. Yeah? So our economic model, while not very impressive, not very complex, it does continue to deliver prosperity into the country. So now we zoom in and try to understand who the hell are we actually as Australians. Ta-da! This is who we are. This is the most simplistic way that I could show you what the Australian population looks like. We have babies on the left, 100-year-old folks on the right-hand side of the chart, and as you see, there's quite a bulge there in the 30s. That is the millennial generation, the by far biggest generation in this country. But what you're looking at here is the status quo. It is the here and now. How terribly boring. We want to know what the future looks like. We want to know what Australia looks like in, let's say, 10 years' time. And forecasting our population only a decade out is super easy because we know exactly how many babies you're going to make this year. Huh? We also know who of you isn't going to make it until next year. And as a country, we literally dictate the migration intake. So we won't be all that far off in our forecasts. So let's have a look at Australia by 2036. First observation, top right-hand corner, we'll be adding 3.5 million people to this country. That is a lot of growth. This is good news for many a business because to quite a degree, a rising tide does lift all boats. But just a quick glance at this chart shows you that this growth isn't evenly distributed across the whole age spectrum. Some segments see much more growth than others. I'm in agreement with almost every aspect of this chart, which is official population forecast from the Center of Population. These are the demographers that sit within Treasury. I am not thinking that this pizza pie chart here is, the pizza-sized growth here. That's not happening. They are projecting that birth rates recover. They move up from 1.4 kids per woman to 1.6 kids in the next 5 years. I think that is not happening. At the very best, I would be granting them as stagnant birth rate in the future, which would essentially see kids, level out here. So essentially, I would argue that the under 18-year-olds in 10 years' time will be just as numerous as they are today. But again, you are not educating those guys. You are educating people that are just a tad older. And once we hit 18 here onwards, you do really see the power of migration play out. Australia obviously is a migration nation. As a rule of thumb, 70% of population growth comes from overseas, imported migrants from overseas, and only 30% is homegrown, more babies born than people die. And the vast majority of migrants fall within a very narrow age band of 18 to 39 years of age. That's migration age, 18 to 39, which makes perfect sense if you think about that. About 40 to 50% of migrants are international students. So, well, they're 18 to early 20s, something like this. And then the skilled migrants that we take into the country because we like their qualifications, well, we want them as young as possible, don't we? So that we only need to fork out cheap beginner wages at the start, and we want them to be productive worker bees in the economy for as long as possible. Also, we want them to pay super for as long as possible so that they end up paying for their own darn retirement. So we constantly rein population onto the 20s and 30s. And that leaves Australia with an extremely rare, actually almost unheard of demographic profile in a developed economy. Despite us pushing the big millennial cohort from the 30s into the 40s in the coming decade, we still see population growth in the 30s. That really pushes up the labor pool in the country significantly. A high migration scenario, of course, that is 230,000 net new migrants, and that's quite special. Yeah, because therefore, yes, the dependency ratio, so workers to non-workers, that keeps going down. But it doesn't nearly go down as fast as in other, rich Asian countries, as in all of Europe. So we soften the blow of the aging of society significantly. Pushing the millennials into the 40s leaves us with a beautiful demographic coincidence in the coming decade. It sounds like I actually made this data up, but it is well and truly correct. The single year of age to see most growth right here, 44-year-olds. And isn't that wonderful news? Because 44, statistically speaking, is the exact time of your life where you spend more money than ever before, ever after. Makes sense, huh? At 44, you had a couple of promotions, so you tend to have a decent amount of money to spend. At 44, you had all the kids that you will ever have, so you have a lot of costs associated with those kids. At 44, you also most certainly haven't paid down your mortgage. That means every penny you earn at 44, straight out the door. Back into the economy, sucks for all the 44-year-olds, but it is, of course, wonderful news for all those businesses that help you to fill your house with crap. So the Bed Bath & Beyonds, the Barbecue Galores, the Harvey Normans, they love this. We push the biggest generation ever, millennials, through the highest spending phase of the life cycle. Super high consumption. Anyone in retail, anyone in this kind of sector of the economy loves this. Who doesn't think this is such a great news story? Biggest generation ever through the highest spending phase of the life cycle. That's our friends at the RBA. The Reserve Bank of Australia is still very much concerned with inflation. And so if we are spending like there's no tomorrow, that is of course inflationary in nature. The RBA has been granted only one tool, the cash rate, translates into interest rates, to curb inflation. So what do they need to do to curb inflation? They need to lift interest rates. It's the only way. It's the only thing they can do. Well, but maybe there is good news hiding in this chart as well, because aren't we retiring over here on the right-hand side? We are retiring this big fat baby boomer cohort as well. over the next couple of years. So that should be welcome news, at least it would have been in the past, because traditionally speaking, the day that you stopped drawing a paycheck was the day that you turned into a poor, penny-pinching pensioner. It was the day that you turned into a deflationary asset. Boy, wouldn't that be welcome now? Huh? As it turns out, most baby boomers are already of retirement age, so we now have detailed spending data about boomers in retirement available to us. And as it turns out, baby boomers in retirement increase their spending. In every category that we measure, except for one, that's charitable giving, that's significantly down. But for all intents and purposes, we are facing a decade where the biggest generation, millennials, and the richest generation, boomers, spend like there's no tomorrow. So that tells me we face a decade with higher rather than lower interest rates. Yes, more data feeds into interest rates and inflation and just the consumption pattern, but I would think you don't want to be also cute in your private investments and in your institutional investments in timing interest rates, hoping for this elusive low interest rate environment. I think all the investments that you need to make to be future ready as an institution, you just need to suck it up and make these investments with this higher interest rate environment. That is an uncomfortable truth, but I think there is no way out of this. Talk about uncomfortable truths. If you look at this chart on the right-hand side, you see that there is a lot of growth in the older populations. The aging of Australia, of course, sounds, again, very boring because you hear about this so often. But I do want to draw your attention to the far right-hand side of this chart, to the extreme end of aging, to the 85-plus cohort. 85 is another very important statistical year for you to be aware of, simply because it is called the median age of death. And you know exactly what this means. It means that half of you, you don't make it. Yeah? So, congratulations to the surviving 50%. Well done. Unfortunately, half of you guys, and that's the front half, you will need assistance with activities of daily life. You need care on a daily basis. In the next 14 years, so that's only 4 years more than I'm showing on this chart. In the next 14 years, we are doubling the 85-plus cohort in this country from 600,000 people right now to 1.2 million people. That is guaranteed to happen. We're not importing, we're not exporting old people. All the old people of tomorrow are already here. They're just younger. So that means we must double the aged care system in 14 years. Will we be able to pull this off? Spoiler alert, no. There's no scenario in which we will get even close to solving this. This is an absolute train wreck in the making. There is no positive outcome there. So, well, but this is the other end of the age spectrum. This is about education. This is about young people. Why am I obsessing about the skills shortage in aged care? Well, as it turns out, the skills shortage in aged care, that is only the single most extreme skills shortage that we are facing in the next decade. The skills shortage that most organizations are experiencing right now, that is systemic in nature and it will get worse. What do I mean by this? Well, we run out of workers simply because on the right-hand side here, we keep pushing this big baby boomer cohort out of the workforce. So there's a big chunk of workers that we lose. We always lost people to retirement. That's not a new phenomenon. But previously, when we lost people over here, we took in a bigger cohort on the left-hand side. Not this time around. I know you look at this chart and you go like, nah, the pile on the left that looks higher than the pile on the right. Surely there'll be plenty of work as well. Don't be too sure about this. First and foremost, we are hiding about 900,000 international students in this chart. And despite the popular narrative of them just coming here to drive Ubers, they do not ultimately contribute to the workforce at scale. So we need to discount for most of those international students to begin with. Also, we are now sending 55% of our year 12 students straight into the university system, which of course means they hang out on campus for just one more degree, one more degree, one more degree. They do ultimately only contribute to the workforce at scale in their mid to late 20s. So we need to discount for those people as well. And hey, remember this big gray pile of millennials there? Those guys have 12 years worth of baby making left in the tank. That means they go on parental leave. That means they leave the world of work at least temporarily. So we run out of workers. That, of course, leads us to all those fun buzzwords that we're constantly talking about. AI, automation, robotics. These things are our friends. This is the technology that we most desperately need in order to keep the productivity growing, to make sure that we have enough energy in the system, so to speak, to make sure that we can make the most of all those opportunities that our simplistic business model keeps granting us. So I do not see a scenario where the intake of AI and the adoption of robotics and so forth, where this leads to very high unemployment in Australia. And if these technologies were to become more productive than I'm forecasting, you know what we would be doing? We would slow down migration intake. That's about it. So I think Australia is very, very safely protected from most of the negative aspects or potentially negative aspects of AI. So I think we are safe there. So such a humble chart, huh? And so many bad news in there. But things could be worse. This is the same age profile, babies on the left, 100-year-old folks on the right. There are not only metropolitan universities. This is the age profile of Metro Australia. Some of you might operate a regional university, and things are quite severe here. So remember how I scared you about running out of workers and aging? Well, in regional Australia, you age heaps more, but at least you have heaps fewer workers. That is the challenge of regional Australia. That is quite astonishing. And this is where regional universities play a crucial role of actually providing a regional, localized workforce that actually deals with these challenges. This is why we also will see very soon more and more visa reforms there that send regional visas. We already do this in the medical system. We will see this more and more with other visa classes as well, where we try to channel migration into certain segments that need it the most, because the demographic profiles of regional Australia is quite severe. A very small share of people, of course, also live in remote areas. But that's a whole different story. The big story is about regional and metro. So just if you were to run a regional university, just remember that you need to be a bit more nervous than your colleagues in metro who already need to be nervous. So we now think about what this AI stuff, what it all means from some sort of technical perspective for a university. And let's think about what you actually sell as a university. Of course, you are education providers, absolutely crucial. And what is education? Yes, in any kind of ethical or moralistic sense, it makes sure that you provide capable young people who are intellectually astute, who are morally wise. That is the ultimate goal of education, but that is not your business. Your business is that you are selling degrees, and you get to make money by selling degrees because some people, these are the employers of the world, think that degrees are useful. They are a useful shorthand of knowing how smart, how capable, how well trained a person is. So that's my idea of what I think a university is selling and why I think this might be at risk pretty soon. Just look at how wonderful a degree is financially speaking. In order to set this up, I must take you back to my favorite day of the year. Only comes around every 5 years actually, and that is of course Census Day. Yeah? So if you guys remember this most magical of nights, you were kindly asked to put your job description down on the census form. And whatever you filled out, our friends at the ABS, they put it into one of 1,300 pigeonholes. And that's the number of jobs that officially exist in the ABS classification. Each and every single one of those jobs has a skill level from 1 to 5 attached to it. The skill level indicates how much formal training is needed for you to do this job. And skill level 1 jobs, for example, they need a university degree. Doctors, engineers. Skill level 2 jobs, you need a bucket load of training, just not a uni degree to become a firefighter, police officer. Skill level 3 jobs, that is the backbone of the Australian middle class. You need a TAFE degree to become a tradie or a manufacturing worker. Skill level 4 jobs, they are called low-skilled jobs. You need a weekend training course to become a barista or maybe a forklift license to work in a warehouse. Skill level 5 jobs are called unskilled labor, no formal training needed. All you need to know for the job we shall teach you on the job: a commercial cleaner, a retail assistant, a waiter, for example. And as it turns out, in this country, the single best indicator for your future earnings by a long shot is your level of education. The more educated you are, the more money you make. It is just that simple. So as a skill level 5 worker, 21-year-olds on the left, 65-year-olds on the right-hand side, this is the income that you can expect as of the last census throughout your career. You earn pretty much the same amount of money because you're being paid by the hour rather than experience or anything like this, or maybe by the item, by the kilometer. So best not to get stuck on a skill level 5 job. Better you get some sort of qualification, work in a warehouse or so forth. That easily gives you another $10,000, $12,000 a year. That is really helpful. Better yet, you get a TAFE level education, get a skill level 3 job. You see there's a pay premium, yet another pay premium for formal TAFE education. That makes an awful lot of sense. Maybe you get one of those skill level 2 jobs, yet there is another pay premium for this. But of course, there is a reason why we go to university at such high rates in this country, simply because the pay premium for a skill level 1 job, that is well and truly juicy. And we do pay this pay premium because we assume that you are capable. And we are at risk of losing this pay premium. Because let's say you are a very cynical employer who says, well, 2026 graduates are about to, they're graduating later this year. This is the first cohort this year that theoretically could have gone throughout their whole university degree and done all of their assignments with AI. And so a cynical employer could say, well, okay, these guys just had AI write their assignments. The professors had them, tested them with, had them assessed with AIs. I'm not paying a premium for this. And so all of a sudden, the skill level 1 pay would decrease, especially for the early career earnings. So then I'm going, well, is this still worth it? Is it still worth going to university if my pay premium isn't there? God knows the costs. The entry costs to get a degree, they become more and more expensive. So that further lowers the pay premium that I can access. So there is a certain risk. I'm not saying that it will happen, but there's a risk that the business model of a university, you pay a fee, you get a degree. This degree guarantees you a better pay throughout your career. There is the risk that this diminishes. And that is something that as a university system, you must proactively fight against, because otherwise your whole business model collapses. So you must ensure that your degree still stands for something. And I think this is by ensuring that you actually find a way to guarantee that you taught your students useful skills, whatever this means. I think part of this would be to double down of in-person events. And this means, yes, lectures are still being recorded and so forth, but ultimately you want to think about what is AI doing for the workforce as a whole. For the workforce as a whole, AI will make all those technical tasks heaps faster. Creating a map, creating charts, writing reports, programming, all these technical tasks become heaps faster with AI. AI does them for you, but you still have to prompt it and so forth. But ultimately, those tasks become super fast. And so the part of a job that are technical in nature, that will decrease in the future for workers. So this is something that I'm less focused on as an employer when I'm hiring staff. So that leaves the second type of tasks with workers, and these are interpersonal tasks. These are tasks where I collaborate with people, where I convince people, where I make creative arguments to people, where I'm networking. These kind of skills, these interpersonal skills, these EQ type skills, they were never unimportant, but they now become even more important because in this really bizarre, counterintuitive way, the AI-heavy future makes the future of world more humane rather than less humane, because the skills that we're left with are more human. So you must find a way to actually sell and provide these skills to your students and then sell these qualifications, because this is what ultimately creates the pay premium, which is ultimately what you're selling to students. So if you now, just to make sure just to draw the picture of what this looks like on a societal level, if you close your eyes and you picture the Australian society, you might picture a beautiful bell curve. Yeah, sure, poor people exist, rich people exist, of course, but we are this egalitarian middle-class wonderland that calls itself Australia. What you're picturing here in technical terms is called the 1960s. That is very much not the case anymore. We have detailed skill level data going back to the 80s. So in the 1980s, late 80s, 23% of us, mostly baby boomers on free university education, held a job that required a university education. Skill level 3 jobs, that's the backbone of the Australian middle class. They would have been the biggest cohort in the 60s. They already shrank down to a mere, very humble 20% by the late 80s. And we mushed skill level 4 and 5 workers into a single category, 48%, close to half of it. Why am I mushing skill level 4 and 5 workers together into one category? Because from now onwards, forever into the future, there is no scenario where skill level 4 and 5 worker can ever afford a house again. That's out of the question. So as I reveal to you what the last 30 odd years look like, we want to see as many skill level 4 and 5 jobs killed as possible. And we kill the jobs, not the workers. So it's totally above board. So let's have a look at what the past looked like. Well, we see more than a third of us now hold a job that literally requires you to have a university education. That is huge. The backbone of Australian society, instead of being the biggest, here in yellow, that is now close to being the smallest cohort of society. That is quite astonishing. I guess good news is we shrank down the skill level 4 and 5 cohort, so it's only 40% of people who I'm pretty certain will not have enough income to purchase a house. Of course, the hope is that lots and lots of those skill level 4 and 5 workers are currently in the education system, who are actually training to get a skill level 3 to 1 job where they have the fighting chance to own a house. We also hope that as many people in this skill level 4 and 5 job segment are secondary income owners to the household who barely supplement the household income. But if you really rely on this isn't a fun country to live in at all. But so you see what this looks like. This isn't a bell curve. This is the exact opposite. This is a letter U. This is a society where we are very much segregating ourselves into economic winners and losers, very much linked to the education. So education so far really determined in collaboration with the income, with the wealth of your parents, it was the education level that decided how well you will be doing in Australia. So far, this was the big selling point for universities. If AI eats into this pie, if AI threatens the idea of university, what then determines the future of where you go to? So universities are a bit of a turning point. You want to make sure that you are ready for this kind of transition. And what do you tell a 17-year-old today about their future? Back in the day, you should have told them, just get as highly educated as humanly possible. That's as simple as that. But if we think that the pay premium might decline, it's not as easy anymore. And that's where the systemic question about what role does university want to play in the workforce really comes in. Because then we go, well, if AI became super efficient, we still need heaps of tradies to build infrastructure, to build housing, because lots and lots of the infill housing that we do when baby boomers are being carried out of the family homes, so we bulldoze the lot and we put 28 crappy townhouses on top. All of this stuff that requires specialized labor, and these are people who will definitely be needed. They will be somewhat aided by robotics and prefab manufacturing and so forth, but ultimately they're humans. These are safer industries. The aged care industry, the medical industry will still be very, very heavily operated by humans. These are safer industries, not necessarily better paid, but safer, more secure employment. So you see there's quite a couple of unknowns, and it really depends on how you view technology is being used. It also depends on how cynical you are about who owns technology and how much of this wealth is being handed over to us as individual workers or institutions, and how much of this now digital labor will remain with the producers of digital labor. OpenAI. Why would OpenAI give you all the workers for just $20 a month? Prices should escalate very soon. Yeah, that's the enshittification argument. Is the idea first get your organizations hooked and then you're being bled dry by it. So these are questions that I can't possibly answer, but these are thought lines that we want to explore. So now that we spoke about so many bad things, please let me remind you of my first slide. Australia is a safe and wonderful place to be in times of disruption. We have an economic business model that continues to provide wealth. We are a nation that is in full control of the migration movement. Some people might say we have too many migrants, but whatever, we are in full control. We can scale this up and down as we please as a country. So it's a very, very privileged position that most other places are not. When we talk about the Liberal Party wants to cut migration very strongly. One Nation wants to cut migration. Clive Palmer wants zero migration. How realistic are those really severe stories? I think you can blissfully ignore all of them because I don't see any way out of massively reducing migration. That's not working. Simply because, first and foremost, you want to remember the skills shortage. If you cut migration significantly, you need to show me how you fill those jobs. Maybe I can fill them. Robots can fill them. Whatever. Then you still haven't solved the second problem that we have, is that the federal budget in Australia relies for about 52% on income tax. It is the single most important source is income tax. 49% of Australian-born people pay income tax. 69% of foreign-born people pay income tax. So if you take out migrants, you are taking out income tax. Unless you are massively reforming the tax system, you do away with income tax as much as you can, and you introduce wealth taxes, you double GST. You could get away with it, you could transform it, but these are politically very, very unbeloved territories. So I think we will just continue to use migrants as scapegoats while we do absolutely nothing to lower migration numbers. This would be my forecast about migration. The skills shortage does remain the single biggest worry for the vast majority of employers in this country, especially in regional Australia. So if you are a university in regional Australia, make sure that you are very, very much linked into what's going on in the local labor market, and you provide pathways in there. You also want to very, very much heavily work with the federal government to ensure that you have pathways from regional students into regional work, and you hand out citizenships or whatever as a goodie along the way. But so far, we still have to say that education does remain the single best indicator for your future income. So therefore, it will remain the most preferred pathway into the work life for most people. But you must not take this for granted. Universities must proactively, right now, adjust for a future that ensures that the pay premium, which I would argue is the ultimate product that you're selling to students, not the moral good that you're selling, but it is the product that you're selling. In order to protect this, you need to get ready. So quick reminder before we jump to the Q&A that the Demographer obviously has a social media channel for every generation. For the baby boomers, I'm writing a column in a newspaper. For the students at your universities, I'm on TikTok, but for you career-minded mob, I'm on LinkedIn. That's on the left-hand side, the QR code. Please make sure to connect over there, and thank you very much for your time this morning.